afternoon. Welcome back to the St. Lucia House of Assembly, where before us, before the Parliament, is a motion to borrow the sum of $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022-2023, and that motion has been moved by the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Economic Development and the Youth Economy, also Minister for Justice and National Security. We are about to resume the debate on that motion as the Speaker now enters the chamber.
Good afternoon, members. And when the House rose, we were debating the motion to borrow the amount of US $102,128,294. The member for Castries North.
Mr. Speaker, permit me this opportunity as a prelude to my contribution to this motion to extend condolences to the family of Mr. Norbert Williams, who passed 2 nights ago, and particularly not the fact that I've known him in the political realm of recent times, but for the fact that I've known him ever since I pioneered the establishment of the youth organization of the organization that I belong to of the recent past. But, Mr. Speaker, we went our separate ways, but I still recognize the contribution which he made at that time to the development of young people and the molding of young people into the politics of the day, and the contribution he has made in that regard. I extend my condolences to his family on his passing. I'd also like to at least quickly extend condolences to a staff member, former staff of the Department of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport, engineering assistant Ralph Henry, who also passed in the recent days. I want to extend condolences to his family. And from my constituency, a young man by the name of Aloysius Loloy Daniel, who himself was a spectacle at an event of music, drama, and dance. And sports particularly, he was an outstanding sportsman, one of great repute, and certainly the community and the family of Leclerc will surely miss Loloy for his skill in sports, his dexterity in dancing, and choreography in his presentations. I want to, of course, recognize him. But, Mr. Speaker, in my very short presentation to this motion, which I support and which seeks to give the Prime Minister the authority to borrow US $102,128,294 for a range of initiatives, I want to focus probably on just maybe 2 areas. and leave the rest alone, because I think most members have spoken in different ways in terms of the description and the justification for the borrowing here today. And I must admit, with a little bit of humor, that my good friend from the constituency of Choiseul Saltibus, when he attempted to lay claim to the motion, to ask that it be clarified as to whether this motion is one which originated from the previous administration or whether it is originating now from this administration. The thing about it is, my dear friend needs to decide what he wants to inherit and what he doesn't want to inherit. Because I'm sure if we are to give him the benefit of this one, then he must also take responsibility for the failed policies of the last administration in their efforts to resolve the crime situation in this country. So we cannot claim one and don't claim the other, but we can always share in some of those initiatives. And so, my dear friend, what we are doing here today is really and truly showing the responsibility of the government, the astuteness of the leadership, and the consciousness of this government in doing what is right in the interests of the people of this country. And therefore, this resolution, when you look at the description of the areas for which it is being borrowed, you will recognize these are relevant sectors: in health, in infrastructure, the reduction of the stock of payables, reduction of land settlement for acquisition, budgetary support, capital expenditure. And as I said early on, all of this was articulated very clearly, crisp, in the presentation made by the Prime Minister 8 months ago. But, Mr. Speaker, one of the areas that the Prime Minister has seen the need to borrow this money for and to resolve a situation which has existed for decades, and that is in the area of land acquisition. It is a very vexing issue. It is one that many people, many citizens, they pine over the fact that the asset is taken away, that the properties are acquired in the national interest, for national projects. And in some instances, there are some who find themselves in the seat of power and take it even for private use in the name of the public interest. And that we need to avoid happening again in this country, and only acquire land in the interest of the people of this country. But more than that, Mr. Speaker, the most vexatious part of it is having acquired the land, and then, the gestation period in terms of settling those individuals, paying them for the land, of course, with what is expected to soothe them by saying you've got an interest, an accumulated interest of 6% on that debt. For me, it's worth nothing. The law says that as soon as you acquire the land, you must attempt to settle those individuals as soon as possible, to use plain language, layman's language. So, Mr. Speaker, having taken this decision to at least liquidate that debt, which stands anywhere in the vicinity of $57 to $60 million in debt in different forms, we now need to determine how do we proceed from here. Because what will happen? This government will come, will get the money, clear off all the outstanding debts, and then we continue to borrow, and we'll find ourselves in the same situation, maybe 10, 15, 20 years when I'm not around. This Parliament will sit again and say, let us find some money, whether it's the form of a loan or whatever, to settle those debts. As a consequence, Mr. Speaker, of this recurring situation, I have mandated the Department of Physical Development, which I head, and which is also responsible for land acquisition, to begin to formulate new policy in terms of land acquisition. How should the government fashion policy that will allow for individuals whose lands are taken to benefit immediately upon acquisition and not allowed to wait for such long periods, and to in some instances, the individuals who have died long before the debt is settled. So we are saying we need to find a way to do this. And while we have not arrived clearly on the nature or the structure of the policy or the principles that we're going to adopt, one of the things I have been saying, and I've already shared it with my people, and that is, in land acquisition, if the land is being acquired for a project, the price of the land must form part of the price of the project. Now, obviously, it's always there. But again, governments allow it to go on. So you've got to build a road, for example, the West Coast Road that we're now redeveloping. The government has acquired so far and will continue to acquire quite a portion of land along the highway, from cul-de-sac through Roseau Valley along the highway, in many instances, slivers of land, etc., to ensure that where we are widening and straightening up of the roads, that we need to get additional land to do so. But we need to factor this into the project cost and to pay the people on time. So if the project will cost, say, the execution of the project will cost $27 million US, and the land to be acquired will cost $10 million US, we must make sure that it is in that figure and that it is allocated, secured, and disbursed upon acquisition, rather than to allow people to wait for when the government has money, and we'll never have money. We'll never have money. We'll find things to spend money on, and we put land acquisition on the back burner, and people are there crying out loud, please help me, I need that money. Now, I believe if you take my land, you pay me the next day. I don't have time to wait, and I'll demand that you pay me next day. And I expect every other St. Lucian to do the same, because you're entitled to it. It's your asset. It's your asset. It's unfair. It is unjust to do such thing, to take the land and to put it out there, waiting to accumulate a 6% interest rate. I believe it is the parliamentary representative for ancillary canneries who also said, not ancillary canneries, Choiseul Saltibus, who also said that we probably now, and maybe the AG will help me on this one in terms of the interest rate. I'm not too sure whether it is by statute, but we probably need to change it. Big one? Okay. But we need to do that, because otherwise the government will run broke. So my short contribution, Mr. Speaker, is to state that in all of this, in this area, we must attempt to fix a problem to prevent it from reoccurring. And that problem is to ensure that people are treated in a just manner, that if your land is taken for the purpose of public or national development, in the public interest, that the government must ensure that the funds are available, whether you get it by loan or otherwise, similar to doing the geothermal project, the renewable energy development project. You go to the bank and get the loan. We need to ensure that we put those funds there so as to pay the people as soon as the acquisition is done. And closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to state that, and I've always said so, and the member for Choiseul Saltibus has also said so, even when he was on the other side, always said that governments will always borrow. Governments will always borrow. But governments must be responsible in borrowing. We cannot borrow in the manner we heard the member for Castries Central this morning speaking about. The reckless borrowing. You know, the kind of indiscretion in borrowing. It's almost like saying, once the money, you can get the money, take it. But in some instances, I saw a document here this morning where the government sold a property for $13 million. And the question is, how much did we pay for it? How much did we pay for the acquisition? Okay? 65 million. So we are bold enough to know fully well the price for which it was purchased. And then to descend into making a mockery out of ourselves, out of the law and the status of our people, and to sell it at $13.5 million. These things should not continue to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, it's about responsible government. It's about government of prudence, being prudent about expenditure. One of the projects he mentioned this morning was the question of the Larissus Road in Vieux-Fort. A road which was built unplanned, not in the program of the government, but was done because of an investor who said, I need to reorient a racetrack, a horse racing track. And so the only way we can do that is to shift the road to give more space for that racetrack to be oriented in a north-south direction. And who pays for it? The taxpayers. The taxpayers are paying for it, while you have the member for Vieux-Fort North clamoring for proper roads. $15 million on one piece of road. And the member for Vieux-Fort North is clamoring. The member for Vieux-Fort South is clamoring and begging for better roads. And the member for Micoud North is on my case every day, asking me to fix up the few roads that he has in that constituency. Mr. Speaker, governments must be comfortable. And so you see it in the profile of the loan, of the allocations that were made by the Prime Minister from this loan. In health, what we are doing to take care of the debt in health based on expenditure pre-COVID and during COVID. The whole question of infrastructure, improvement of infrastructure, the reduction of the debt stock, the reduction of the stock of profiles, the stock of payables, meaning that all those persons, a number of them are very small business people that the government is indebted to settle this thing and to move on. And of course, to change the debt profile of the country. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that today's motion is one that is necessary, it is relevant, and it is reasonable. And it's only a very conscientious leader, a prudent leader, a leader who understands what it is to be responsible for the resources of the state, who can come at this time, 8 months after managing the affairs of the country based on cash flow, can now come and say, listen, we are going out there, we have negotiated, we are borrowing an amount of $102 million US to take care of all of those expenditures, having announced it in the budget 8 months ago. I want to commend this, the member, and I support this resolution.
Deputy Prime Minister and member for Castries South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues who spoke before me in expressing support for the motion before this House. Mr. Speaker, I ask you permission to express condolences to the Joseph family of Sisera. Diana Joseph, 96 years, was the matriarch of the Joseph family, wife of Rudens Joseph, a founding member of the St. Lucia Labour Party, and many meetings discussing the formation of the St. Lucia Labour Party took place at her home. And she would recall preparing supper and meals for many of the founders of the Labour Party as they sat with George Charles to form our great party. And she is a lady who everyone would tell you was one of the most lovable souls that you'd ever meet. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, that I am expressing condolences, I want to, as I will not have an opportunity before, express, the satisfaction at seeing yet another constituent in Castries South reach the milestone of 100 years in the next 2 days. Felicite Sonny, the matriarch of the family. And I pray that God will allow her to see her birthday on Thursday. She's from a family of many others who've reached that milestone. And certainly on Thursday in Bassa Joseph, there will be a grand celebration. Mr. Speaker, this motion comes before this House in rather trying times. We all know the consequences that COVID had on our nation, on our people, and on our economy. We inherited the government in July 2021, and the Prime Minister made it very clear then that he had to, as a matter of priority, to stabilize the economy. There was a lot of borrowing by the previous government. We all knew that they had to be borrowing because of the consequences of COVID. Virtually the world shut down on us. And with our economy so dependent on tourism, you can imagine the severe consequences that it would have had. I think everyone in here would remember in the early part of 2020, we were being told in this House that the economy was so well managed, that things were booming, and that we were on a steady course. And you would remember, Mr. Speaker, we stood in this House and we asked the then government, the then Minister of Finance, the member from Miko South, how could you last month say to us, things were so good, it was booming, and then unexpectedly COVID hit us, shut down, and then we crash. Now, it would not have been unusual if other islands suffered the same fate we suffered. Well, we all suffered the same fate, but ours was exceedingly worse. Why, if we were doing so well, we were the best performing, the same event confronted all of us, but we came out the worse for it? Now, we can argue on opposite sides about who is better at managing the economy, but the truth is there for everyone to see, and that truth is guided by facts. By facts. And we cannot contest that. The fact is St. Lucia did the worst in the Caribbean because of the COVID pandemic. And it led to a significant amount of borrowing, beyond what other territories had to do. And it is because of how this country was managed. Now, again, we can spend a lot of time arguing who is right and who is wrong. The point is, the previous government took a certain pathway which proved to be disastrous. Our task when we came in was to steady the ship. We did not have the luxury of going out and borrowing excessively or without discretion, as a member from Castries North just stated. So this Prime Minister has had to be exceedingly cautious and deliberate in the decisions that he has made. But, Mr. Speaker, important in all of this is the whole role of tourism. And I want to say a few things before I come back to the point I was making. We all understand how important tourism is, and when COVID hit, how it affected us. Mr. Speaker, equally important for us as a tourism destination, and more so one which is starting to promote with greater vigor the notion of community tourism, of creating authentic experiences, and saying we want our visitors to leave the resorts more than before and to visit the communities. That is what we're selling now. There's a clear reason why we are doing so. It comes back to the core of our economic philosophy, that more St. Lucians should participate in the tourism industry, and more St. Lucians should own the tourism industry. That is a core of our developmental trajectory. And it has been there from times, but now this historical moment requires us to push that agenda more than ever. More than ever. Because the Prime Minister himself in an earlier life was one of the architects of that approach. And I'm only continuing that whole approach that has characterized our notion of what tourism should be all about. So we are saying visitors should go out to the communities more. We are saying communities should build more assets that can attract visitors. But in all of that, Mr. Speaker, the events of the last few days really tells us how difficult the task is. Let's not deny it. And the member from Strozel Saltibus called on everyone to play their part to fight the scourge of crime that we are facing. And he expressed his support for the Commissioner of Police and the words of the Prime Minister. And I want to join all of them in saying, Mr. Speaker, that if we are to succeed and fulfill the dream and the vision that we have, we must endeavor to win this battle against the monster that crime is, Mr. Speaker. I know, Mr. Speaker, I can recall as far back as 1987, Mr. Speaker. I was then a youth leader. The member from Castries North will remember that. It had gotten to a point in St. Lucia where the then Minister of Education, Louis George, and his permanent secretary was then Dr. Frederick, and his chief education officer, Dr. Michael Louis, thought it necessary to form a national task force on indiscipline in St. Lucia, because the indiscipline was starting to raise its head in St. Lucia in an unprecedented manner. And I recall I was the NYC, the youth rep, on that national task force. And I remember we presenting a paper to the task force where we said to the then government that we were going to face severe consequences in the future if we did not invest more on the development of our human resources in St. Lucia. Now, the UWP government of that time was a very prudent government. If you study our political history, the political economy of St. Lucia, you will get a deeper understanding of the approach to economic development then. It was a government that did not invest heavily monies that they thought they did not have, that they had a certain approach to it. And we're not passing judgment. We're not being normative. We just say it is, what it was. And we in the NYC were saying, no, invest in the future, invest in our people. In those days, Mr. Speaker, children, there was no national stadium, there was no cricket ground. You know, the facilities for young people, we felt was not enough. In fact, some of us supported the member from Castries North becoming Minister of Youth because we believed then that he understood our language and that he would have made a difference. Although, I must admit, we told him we ain't sure he's going to succeed because within that setting, he didn't understand that kind of language. He was not blue yet, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we were not investing in our people. We were calling on the government to have a clear cultural policy to invest in creative industries as far back as 1987. Mr. Speaker, as far back as that. But it was not heeded. I was a teenager then. And we were saying in the years to come, we will pay the price for not creating that enabling environment in St. Lucia where our young people can thrive and grow, Mr. Speaker. I remember in 1997, Mr. Speaker, when the Labour Party came into power, and we spoke of universal secondary education, there were people who criticized us for even thinking that every child in St. Lucia should go to secondary school. Think about that. When we announced we had every child in St. Lucia can now go to a secondary school, they said we were wasting money because some children are too lazy to go to secondary school. that they should leave school at standard 6. And we said, no, as much as the system might not be perfect, it's better to send them to secondary school. We started vocational education. It had been started by the previous UWP government, but we tried to take it to a different level altogether with the construction of the Cicero Secondary School, and in Vieux-Fort, a technical school. Mondida was built. Mr. Speaker, all because we believe that you must invest in your people to create an environment where your people see opportunities in life, and social ills and social degradation would be less of a pathway to take, Mr. Speaker. Today, the chickens have come home to roost, Mr. Speaker. We have a problem. And there have been successive prime ministers. The member from Castries North has had to deal with the problem. The member from Vieux-Fort South has had to deal with the problem. The member from Micoud South has had to deal with the problem. This is not a new problem. I must say to you, social media makes it appear in a way which we were not accustomed to before. But it is not a new problem, Mr. Speaker. It's not a new problem. And each former prime minister, actually former prime ministers, each of them can give you their own experiences. The member from Vieux-Fort South will tell you the number of police stations he built, the number of vehicles he bought, the legislation he changed. The member from Castries North can tell you about his own attempts. Equally, the member from Micoud South. So the challenge, Mr. Speaker, has been there successively, facing government after government. It is now our turn to try to solve it. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, we can solve it. We have to solve it. If we are to succeed, Mr. Speaker, we have to find a way to solve this challenge we have before us. And when challenge is before you, it is not a time to run for shelter. It's a time to stand up and to be counted, Mr. Speaker. And this government will stand up and be counted, Mr. Speaker. So as we offer condolences to all the victims of crime, Mr. Speaker, we want to say to St. Lucians that we must fight collectively to overcome this menace we have, to overcome this threat to our society, Mr. Speaker. We have to do it. We may not even know exactly how to do it, but we know we must fight. We must do something, Mr. Speaker. I don't know the answers. I can't tell you. I have my own common sense solutions that I can give, but I know we must fight collectively. And when you heard about the citizens meeting yesterday, announcing their own program to fight crime, I want to applaud them, Mr. Speaker. I want to encourage them, Mr. Speaker. And I've said to the Prime Minister that I want for us in the next budget, and he agreed with me totally. He said to me, you were thinking just like me, we're on the same page, to give more money to the churches to have more crusades, to go out there and play their part equally, to give more money to youth groups, to give more money to the sporting organizations. Let us spend more in the social intervention programs, Mr. Speaker. We have to, Mr. Speaker. You see, Mr. Speaker, I also remember in 1997, when the Labour Party came into power, Mr. Speaker, when we saw the level of youth unemployment and what was going on, we started the STEP program. You know, Mr. Speaker, others may not know. I was the one who, Dr. Anthony, the member from Vieux-Fort South, had given the responsibility to start the STEP program. And I was the first chairman of STEP. And we did so because we wanted to create opportunity for persons who had been deemed the unemployables in St. Lucia. And we were criticized. We were giving money away. We were making mendicants of people. Even in the elections in the 2016, that same thinking was perpetuated. Because they believe when you have social intervention programs that you're making mendicants of people, you're throwing away money, that instead you should give it to the private sector. I'm not saying the private sector should not get, but that cannot be the only solution, Mr. Speaker. So we are determined as a government. We're going to fight this through law enforcement. We're going to fight it through social interventions. And social interventions will carry the full range of options from the religious, the spiritual, the community, right through, Mr. Speaker. But we must also fight it in the international arena, Mr. Speaker. Because I've said it before, we do not manufacture guns in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. We don't. And recently we had a presentation on money laundering, you know, the whole framework that exists. And we've been asked to look critically at the financing of terrorism and the financing of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction in St. Lucia. And we ask the question, who is looking after the financing and the trafficking of small arms? Because, truth be told, terrorism is not a threat to us. Weapons of mass destruction is not a threat to us. But trafficking of small arms and the financing of that trafficking is a threat to us. And we must let our voice be heard internationally and call on the countries that manufacture those guns to take responsibility for the consequences of them. And the transshipment routes, somebody has to take responsibility for it. We cannot believe we can fight this on our own. And the member from Strozel, Soldibus, was right. It comes down, despite all the complexity of crime, it comes down to a fundamental point. There are too many guns on the streets. How did they get here? Who's bringing them? Who's financing them? We cannot solve that on our own. We can do as much as we can in our own confined space of St. Lucia, but there's a bigger force that can overwhelm us. So do not believe we can solve this problem by social intervention or by changing legislation or just law enforcement. We have to call on the international community to recognize what is happening to us. If some countries are concerned about terrorism and about the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, we must put on the agenda our concern too. And this government will have to do so. We will have to do so, Mr. Speaker. And we need to let all St. Lucians know. You must be brave, you must be courageous. You must believe in our capacity as a people that we can overcome this challenge. It is what lies before us, and if we are going to develop this country into a prosperous nation, we must overcome this challenge, and we have the capability to do so. So let us start working together to do so. We must not be soft on crime. We must be understanding of the circumstances that can cause one to go into crime. But we must never be soft on it, Mr. Speaker. I have had over the last 2 to 3 months, not 2 months, Mr. Speaker, to know some individuals I know personally lose their life because of gun violence in my constituency. Personally. And over the next few days, I have to participate in the funeral of another one, Mr. Speaker. A lovely young lady, Mr. Speaker, who lost her life, Mr. Speaker. So, all of us as parliamentary reps probably know individuals who were affected. We have to dedicate ourselves as leaders as well to do what is necessary to fight this threat that we face, Mr. Speaker. And when I hear in a press conference the former Minister of Tourism boldly say to the world that we are hiding the figures that it affects crime against tourists because we want higher numbers in St. Lucia, it really makes you wonder, Mr. Speaker. Yes, as politicians, we sometimes undermine and we question and we challenge and we take on each other, Mr. Speaker. Maybe they believe in their own minds and they say it all the time, oh, that's what you all used to do. I know I never used to do that. And I know for a fact my colleagues would not like that. It doesn't mean we were not critical, but nobody gloats over the destruction of the country, Mr. Speaker. But maybe again, they're not from this country, Mr. Speaker. But that's another story for another day, Mr. Speaker. That's another story for another day. You know, Mr. Speaker, we cannot be happy when St. Lucia is facing a challenge such as this. We cannot be happy. You know, there are many other things you can criticize us about, Mr. Speaker. But certainly, you cannot rejoice when the country is facing some of its darkest times, Mr. Speaker. But again, I keep saying, I know we will overcome and I know we will succeed. And I know that economic philosophy I spoke about of creating a prosperous nation by giving St. Lucians more opportunity and making them owners, Mr. Speaker, of the economic pillars of this country. We will achieve it. We will achieve it. I think, Mr. Speaker, this is why this borrowing becomes even more important, because it is guided by a philosophy, Mr. Speaker, that always places people first, Mr. Speaker. Always. The Prime Minister, the member for Castries East, stood up and he listed the number of occasions we came into this Parliament and borrowed monies. And 5 out of the 7, if my calculation was right, had nothing to do with new expenditure. It had to do with expenditure commitments made before we got into government, which we had to fulfill. And when the leader of the opposition posts how many times we've come to the House to borrow and how much we've borrowed, well, again, he believes misinformation is the way to go. But a lot of it was not even commitments made by us. And similarly, when you speak of $60 million in land acquisition cost that has to be paid, that was not done by us in 17 months. It wasn't. But we have an obligation to meet those costs. We have. Like the member from Castries North said, it is grossly unfair to take somebody's property and make them suffer and wait for years to get their money. It's wrong. You talk about payables, Mr. Speaker. Over almost 130 odd million dollars in payables when we came in. In payables, or more than that, in payables, Mr. Speaker, do we say to those individuals, those service providers, that we were not in government, so therefore we will not pay you? It's been 17 months, Mr. Speaker. Some of them have not been paid. We have to pay, Mr. Speaker. The DFCs, Mr. Speaker. I mean, we've been through this before in this House. We are a responsible government. We've waited 17 months. We've tried to manage this economy, to stabilize it, not to engage in excessive borrowing. Just manage it well enough that we do not put more pressure on our debt stock, Mr. Speaker. We've reached a point where we have to fulfill some of those obligations. So we've had to come to this House to fulfill what the Prime Minister said in his budget statement. And this is what we are doing today. This is what we're doing. So, Mr. Speaker, I am glad that we finally reached here today. We can take care of those outstanding matters, leftover bills from COVID, land acquisition, payables, and many others. We can clear this, Mr. Speaker. We have no choice, but we have to do it. And at the same time, Mr. Speaker, there are some new costs, of course. The operations of government must continue. Must continue. I hope in there, Mr. Speaker, there is something for the Bassa Joseph Community Center, Mr. Speaker. But I hope so, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, I'm patiently waiting. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, that I'm very thankful, Mr. Speaker, to the member from Castries North and the Prime Minister member of Castries East for the lovely roads we have in Marigot and Bassa Joseph right now, Mr. Speaker. I would also like roads in Monkey Tongue repaired too, Mr. Speaker, but I'll be a little patient. So, like the member from Babono who said she knows a lot of that money will be filtering down into Babono, I want some of it to filter down into the Bassa Joseph, Mr. Speaker, Community Center. And by the way, we're already using it, even if it's not finished. We'll have Solo Night there on December 23rd, so those of you who follow Solo can come and join us and listen to Wule Tete and some of the other groups perform, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to express my support for the motion before us and to ask the Prime Minister to continue in this present approach. There's a lot I can say. To speak about the community tourism program, to speak about the micro-enterprise fund, to speak about the youth economy. So much, Mr. Speaker, that we are doing to offer more opportunities for our people, to empower our people. It's a whole process of economic enfranchisement that is taking place in this country, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to accelerate it. So, Mr. Speaker, Thank you very much. I support this motion totally.
Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much to honorable members, including the member for Choiseul. The member for Choiseul is a very different person today. I applaud his demeanor and his behavior today, Mr. Speaker. It shows what bad company cannot do you. Mr. Speaker, I want to answer just a few questions posed by the member for Choiseul, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this borrowing today is part of an agreement that was negotiated with the Taiwanese government from 2022 to 2026. So it's new. It's not anything that was there before our time, and that's part of an agreement with the Taiwanese government. And I want to thank the Minister for Health for thanking the Taiwanese government for this agreement, Mr. Speaker. So it's a new loan, it's new money. It was not negotiated before by the previous government. From the previous government, there was a $10 million loan, which we came to Parliament to get the resolution passed. That was from the previous government. But this loan is purely from the government we negotiated with the Taiwanese. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, on the statutory interest rate, the member for Castries North brought it up, and I've been informed by legal minds that 6% is set by the courts. So we have to go to the court to ask it to be reduced or to be increased. So it's not something we can do without going to the court. It's normally set by judges. It doesn't depend on the bank rate or the borrowing rates. That's how our laws are. So it's called the statutory rate of interest. Well, we have to go back to the court. Yeah, that's something we can explore. See, when you give us good ideas, we explore it. That's how we are. That's our nature. That is why we look into, and you brought it up, we look into the dogs. Because, Mr. Speaker, the reason why there was not need for the dogs, as I told you before, is that we had the scanners. They were either on the verge of working or they were working. So there was no need at the time for both the dogs and the scanners. But the story of the scanners is and you see, Mr. Speaker, when I hear these things about crime, and I want to really applaud the member for Castries South for his contribution, it almost looks like some talk show hosts are gloating, are rejoicing at the fact that we have an issue of crime in St. Lucia. But, Mr. Speaker, that is not good for the country. It's not good for the country. It's not good for the future of the country. And it appears as if it affects this Prime Minister and us now. It appears like that. So we gloat. And you almost hear, I heard a press conference, and I heard my colleague from Castries South spoke about when we were in opposition. I can swear we never did that. Never. I heard a press conference, and I heard a kind of almost a happiness that things. Somebody was asked, "What do you do about guns?" He said, "You build a port in cul-de-sac." If you're talking about guns coming into the country now on barrels, the answer is you build a port in cul-de-sac. You call that a solution now for a port in cul-de-sac. Let's just think about it. And these things sound, it's just like VAT on electricity. These things sound, and people say, "Oh, that's good solutions." What are solutions the government is giving? Anything you say, they tell you is not good enough. Anything you say or do is not good enough. but nobody can tell you what to do instead. I'm saying in the public that this government will accept anyone, including the leader of the opposition, who will come and have a discussion and have a meaningful discussion on crime and the solution to crime. This government will listen to anybody who wants to say that. Anybody. Anybody, Mr. Speaker. But you must remember, when you were in opposition, there was a crime commission, and I attended. I went to the meeting in opposition. I went because I was interested. I didn't sit back and gloat, and I didn't sit down and attack the Minister for National Security and say he doesn't have a clue. I didn't talk about weak leadership. I went to the, and people seem to forget that. I went to the meeting. They appointed me, but they never called me again. So I can't go with. I agreed, but no one ever called me. Mr. Speaker, and these are the things that people tend to forget. But you know, when we try to make political mileage of these things, they come back and they haunt you. Because the member for Castro made a point. Former Prime Minister Stephen King had the issue. Prime Minister Kenny Anthony had the issue. Prime Minister, what's his name? Alan Chastanet also had the issue. This issue has been in this country for a long time. And when you say, not only in St. Lucia, they tell you, don't talk about other places, don't talk about other places. There seems to be a pandemic of crime in the region. Even in the world, if you want to extend it a little bit. I mean, there seems to be a pandemic. Since COVID, something seems to be happening as far as crime is concerned. I won't come here and speak about other countries, but something seems to be happening, and what we must do is we have to forget this political mileage that we think we can gain and try our best to confront that problem. Because somebody just sent me something on a British paper. Somebody sent something on a British paper quoting crime in St. Lucia. And, you know, what we are doing when we promote these things, and when our headlines show this murder and that murder, what we do is we give the foreign press fuel. We fuel them, Mr. Speaker. Now, when we give them fuel, it means that our tourism will get affected. And when you have former tourism minister making the point that you hide tourism figures, you hide crime figures because you do not want to affect the tourism industry. It's painful. And citizens of this country should condemn that kind of behavior, Mr. Speaker. Because, all right, supposing something happens, a miracle happens, and we get out of government tomorrow, and you get in. You think the gunmen will worry about you in office? The gunmen will be gunmen. The gangs will do what they have to do. The hits will continue. Because when these guys are committing the crime, you think they care about who is prime minister? I hope not. So we cannot afford, and what's happened is it has never happened before. Because remember when we were in opposition, and the member from Beaufort South, when he was prime minister, he always said the few things you can get together on is crime, bananas. Remember him saying that all the time, crime and bananas, let's get together because this is very important. But what's happening now, Mr. Speaker, is not good. This gloating, this thing about blame the prime minister, oh, he's the minister of national security, what is he doing? My father was a policeman, not me. This thing about gloating and every day, as if we're almost happy that is happening, and this minister, and I'm Minister of National Security. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, we must stop it, because in the final analysis, all of us will pay, and the country will not benefit. Other countries have states of emergency as we speak. States of emergency as we speak, because of the crime issue. States of emergency, but they are larger countries, and then the tourism will not get affected as it would in St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker. So I want us to have a rethink and a restart. The Minister of National Security has got enough blows every day for crime. We make all kinds of comparisons. Even you, Mr. Speaker, have come into the firing line. I mean, it's time. It is time, Mr. Speaker, because whilst we are trying to score political points, the gunmen are still shooting, and the crime will continue while we try to score political points. Mr. Speaker, have you ever thought about the reasons why certain things happen in St. Lucia? Have you ever thought about it? Is it because of the things we say? Is it because of what the threats that we make? Because, Mr. Speaker, threats are not only threats made by gunmen, Politicians make threats. And when politicians make threats, they should be called up, and an excuse should not be made for politicians when they make threats to people, particularly journalists. That should be condemned by everyone, Mr. Speaker. But you don't make excuses and say it happened before. And that happened before. It always happens. Two wrongs cannot make a right. If something was wrong then, it can't be right now. It was wrong then and it's wrong now, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, whilst we use some of these resources to fight crime, and I've said that the budget that we're going to be debating for 23-24, the emphasis is going to be on national security. That's going to be, and I hope to get the support of honorable members. It's going to be on national security, Mr. Speaker. Because we cannot, regardless of the growth and the work that we're doing in the tourism industry, that kind of publicity, that kind of gloating, these kind of headlines, these kind of talk shows every day, and people calling the station with all kinds of solutions that make no sense. And nobody is saying to them, what you say does not make sense because it's an attack on the Minister of National Security. So nobody says, does that make sense? Nobody says so. Just allow it to happen. Just allow the person to say it because it's an attack on the Minister of National Security or attack on the government. Just say it. Doesn't make sense. So, Mr. Speaker, I call on every citizen, let us join in this fight. And anybody who has solutions, come forward and let us discuss it. Come forward and let's discuss it. Because what's happening now, particularly the gloating and the publicity, Mr. Speaker, I made a comment on how crime is reported in other countries. And that is a fact. I won't go and call any country's name, but it's a fact. And it was said that I want to suppress the press. I want to stifle press freedom because I made a comment on how we report crime in this country. So many things are happening in the country that are positive, Mr. Speaker. But every headline cannot be about a murder. And I'm not saying, I'm not wanting to suppress the press or stifle press freedom. That's an opinion, Mr. Speaker. The same way that a politician should not threaten a journalist on tape and dare the Prime Minister to disclose the tape, and when the tape is disclosed, an excuse is made for that tape that was disclosed. Listen to the sequence. a threat is made to a journalist. I come here and I say a threat is made. I don't identify who, when, how, or what. I just say a threat is made. I am dead. Oh, you always make accusations. You make accusations. So, play it. I say, okay, all right. The tape got played. I'm not even sure who played it, but the tape got played. The tape gets played, and instead of the people who were daring me to play it, when the tape gets played, they make excuses and say that mightn't be the tape and somebody did that before, etc. Instead of saying that is wrong in the environment that we are operating in St. Lucia, that is wrong and you should not do that. You know, Mr. Speaker, that's how it is, and that's how it will continue to be, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this motion, as we've said clearly, is to fund the budget. And what I want to note to you, Mr. Speaker, is the transparency in which we did that. We did not hide. And again, again, Mr. Speaker, when the truth isn't spoken, we cannot make excuses for things that are not true. You saw on a Facebook page that this government had borrowed $500 million sometime in October. We showed proof that wasn't true. None of the people who are repeating that have said that, listen to me, Mr. Leader of the Opposition, you should not say things that are not true. They prefer not to play as if it didn't exist, as if he never said so. And he put it on his Facebook page, he said it in public, but no one is saying you must not say that. That cannot be right. That is bad example, Mr. Speaker. That is bad example. And you see, and these bad examples manifest themselves in several ways, because you cannot openly say things that are not true on the record, and you never pull it back, and people accept it because they support you. That can't be right. So Mr. Speaker, what did we say about this budget? On page 63 of the budget, we made it clear how we are going to finance the budget. And I want you to read it, Mr. Speaker, at the end of page 62. We said, in addition to the 1.327 billion in revenue and grants, the net financing needs of the budget amount to $505,124,000. Clearly, we never hid it. We never said it's on the record. And we further said how we are going to be raising that money, Mr. Speaker. It's clear. So why do you have to come and Mr. Speaker, you don't want me to say lies, so I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't say lie. You don't want me, why are you to come and deliberately mislead people on something that was clear? But Mr. Speaker, total revenue projected in the budget, 1.327.68 million. Total expenditure, less refunds, 1.832.80 million. Financing gap, 505.12 million. How are we going to raise that financing gap? It said $79 million worth of short-term borrowing, because we've tried to change from long-term to short-term, and the rest in long-term borrowing, which we are doing here this afternoon. From short-term to long-term, which we are doing here this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Very transparent and very clear. Very transparent and very clear. But, Mr. Speaker, there are certain headwinds that we did not anticipate. We did not anticipate this spike in the cost of goods and services, and in the cost of the changes in the supply chain that will cause freight to be so expensive, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday, the Minister for Commerce announced there will be an increase in the price of bread, Mr. Speaker. And the government has been subsidizing and will continue to subsidize even if that increase. Even with that increase, the government continues to subsidize the price of flour. For the simple reason, we do not produce flour. And that is why we are speaking about alternative means of eating. And again, when I made the point of eating our bananas, I was ridiculed. They paid children to say the Prime Minister wants us to eat banana oil. That was sad. It was very sad, Mr. Speaker, because right now, I'm going to make another point, and you all can ridicule me if you want. We must start to think about cassava flour. You see, Mr. But that short-sightedness and that failure to understand that you've lost government, that's what causes things to happen. Because with the increase, the escalation in the price of flour, let's think about cassava flour and banana flour. This is what we have to look into. This is called import substitution. But if you continue, instead of educating people, if you continue to try to make political mileage because you believe that this is a soft underbelly of the government, you will not survive. Because if you get the government, the price will still be the same. It will still be the same. And I heard the leader of the opposition says, we didn't take his advice on how to we didn't take his advice on how to improve the supply chain. Oh, what do you have? It's a sensitive topic. You understand? That's what he said, That's what he said. We didn't take his advice. So, Mr. Speaker, so these are the challenges that we have. These are the challenges that we have, Mr. Speaker. And the challenge, I must say, all countries have. It is not unique to this country. What the member for Castro South said is true. If this government told us, transparency, that we had $3 billion worth of investment come to this country, $3 billion. No one has questioned why should a man with his of sound mind and intellect tell the world that we have $3 billion of investment, and in his term of office, pre-COVID, post-COVID, pre-minister, during minister, he hasn't built one hotel. Every budget, we heard 7 hotels. Before COVID, and don't use COVID as an excuse, Before COVID, 7 hotels. Now, after COVID, no hotel. But I mean, but we allowed that to pass because we don't like the Prime Minister, and you write nonsense about black. What do you say about marsh and things? Mr. Speaker, why are we afraid of our past and afraid of our patrimony and afraid of our heritage? Why do you believe that we must say we are products of countries that we do not belong to? Mr. Speaker, so you write a whole article on the paper because you believe that I stand up for what I believe in. I don't want to hide anything. I'm proud of where I come from. And all of us are proud of where we come from. Why must we hide it? Why must we have false accents? We have to be proud of our past. I was born and bred in One Works Road. Why you want me to hide it for? And when I said, you vexed me because I said, but I'm happy for my achievements, and I'm happy that these men and women and the people of Kashisif has elected me as a prime minister, and I'm proud of it. So why do you think that I mustn't say it? But you attack me, a whole 2 articles on blah, 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 blah. Mr. Speaker. But Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have to get a little more serious in our criticisms and a little more serious in how we handle the affairs of this country, Mr. Speaker. A little more serious, Mr. Speaker. Because what we are doing will not help anyone. And of course we were in opposition. But look at the things that we criticize in opposition. We criticize borrowing $42 million for Lockerbie. Up to today, the only product of Lockerbie is 2 playing fields, 2 artificial turf, what do you call it? Artificial turfs on Soufrière, and the fellows in Soufrière, they are very not because they can't play cricket anymore, because you convert their field where you play cricket, track football, you convert it into a no cricket field. Soufrière has some of the best cricketers in Soufrière. And 2, you put one in Dennery North, and one in Miku. In the, yes, and one in Miku. That's what we speak about, you know. We spoke about that borrowing. $32 million. $32 million from Lockerbie. $32 million, and the only visible, and I want someone to tell me that is not true. The only visible sign of the $42 million from Lockerbie is the Soufrière, Dennery North, and the Yusuf. That's the only visible signs. Where else? So if you criticize that, you must criticize that borrowing. But compare it to the borrowing that we want to do in this bill or in this budget. Compare it to the borrowing, Mr. Speaker. What do you do? Borrowing. You borrow $certain million to bring some people in a thing called permanent due. The civil service is replete with technocrats, technicians. Sometimes I'm amazed at the qualifications that exist in the Indonesian civil service. I'm amazed. Masters, PhDs, 2 masters, bachelor's degrees, all kind of qualifications. But you need to borrow $13 million to bring people from abroad to come and tell you what to do with your systems. That's what we criticize. And what happened? Nothing works. First of all, these people don't understand the solution culture. They don't understand it. Nothing works. That's what we criticize. That's the borrowing that we criticize. We criticize the borrowing to build a road. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I was challenged again to talk about St. Jude and the airport. Now, you know, let me tell you something about me. You know what I have the most in the world? Patience. Like Job. And when a former colleague of mine who's lost his way used to say, he say, ek patience okatiwe boyo for me, bet rouge. But now the prophet has lost his way. as a member of myself, as a member for Kashisif, I will tell you, the poor gentleman, a guy that was so dynamic and so vibrant, the prophet has lost his way. I feel so sorry for him. Anyhow, talk for yourself. So, Yes, with patience. So you know all the challenge I'm challenged. Oh, the tape I was challenged, the tape came out. You see all the challenge I've been challenged about Hiwanora Airport and St. Jude Hospital. You see all these challenges. I'm saying nothing. I am saying nothing. All these challenges about St. Jude, Hiwanora, I'm saying nothing. So here's what we criticize the borrowing for. We criticize the borrowing for borrowing $15 million to build a road for a horse racing track. And we criticize the fact that you borrowed further to change a whole airport. An entire airport. You've changed it. You've changed the whole structure just to facilitate a horse racing track. And if you think that's not true, just wait to hear. Patience, yes. Because it's not mere saying, you know, and you can ask my colleagues here, on these two issues, and some of them complain that I have too much patience. On these two issues, I was urged, I said, no, colleagues, let us get independent people to look at it first. And I know some of them quietly say, I'm too patient. Or some of them say that I must be a little more aggressive and does seem to be always on the side of being cool. You want me to be more aggressive? You understand? So what we did, we looked for two independent, not investigations, you know, to look at these two products independently. And you'll be surprised to know that the conclusions from both local and foreign experts are the same. Yes. You'll be surprised to know that. You'll be surprised to know that. Because some of the borrowing that you did for St. Jude, that is the borrowing that we criticizing. Why in the good name that you must take a building, and the debate for St. Jude will start. But since you talk about borrowing, we have to borrow some money for St. Jude and bring it up now. The debate, I promise that you're going to have a full debate on St. Jude. And the member for Cassius will not let me forget that. We'll have a full debate on St. Jude. Do you know? Last week we went to the police. We went to Vieux-Fort to sign for the upgrade of the police station in Vieux-Fort. And again, I'm criticized for that. Right? So we went to St. Jude. A colleague of ours was there. He's not normally an emotional guy. He got a headache. He was actually, I saw the guy visibly shaken. He says to me, why did these guys allow these buildings to waste and build that monstrosity? I mean, the gentleman, I won't mention his name because that's not my style of calling people's name in the parliament. He was visibly shaken. Because I want to invite you, member for Chozel, let us go and take a walk on St. Jude now. I'll drive you. And you will see the difference in St. Jude now. Only with cleanup. Only clean. We've just cleaned it up. You see the difference in St. Jude now and the difference in the thing you all have there, the box. But you know, they challenged me again. When I'm going to reveal what that box is about, I hope I get no one complains and no one makes excuses. Because even you, it'll hurt your heart. Because I'm sure you don't have all the facts. Innocent until proven guilty. I'm sure you don't have all the facts. Because when you will understand that you spent up to today, I have to pay a bill. I have to pay a bill on this St. Jude thing. Up to today, you understand that security at St. Jude, the bill that I have to pay up to May 2023 is about $600,000 just for the period June to May. for security. There must be security. Yes. And you won't know the past bills. I mean, when that debate on St. Jude will come, I hope all the talk show hosts listen and speak about what we say, because we seem to forget certain things. This St. Jude thing, and you have to borrow to fund it. This St. Jude thing will make the most stern person and the strongest supporter. By the way, I want to tell you something. I have a letter from the United Workers' Party to visit St. Jude. I don't know if you know that. Yes, to visit St. There's a request, and again, they might challenge me again. I have a letter to visit St. Jude from the United Workers' Party. Yes, I don't know if you know that, but probably the letter is not locked in the office. I have it. I will let them come and visit it. I let them go. Huh? When I applied, when we applied to visit the hospital, they took me all over the place, said all kind of things. But I have a letter from the United Workers' Party to visit St. Jude. I'm going to allow them to do it.
Let's go with them.
Yeah, I'll go with them. Yeah. We're going out to have, yeah. Because when they have completed that visit, I am sure they'll have a change of mind. You understand? Because I want you, my friend, to visit St. Jude now. Just go in there now, and you'll see the difference and how the people in the stadium could have been there a long time ago, and not at a cost. We've spent $100 million on this monstrosity, and you don't know about it yet. You know nothing about it yet. I'm sure you do not know. So all those who challenge me, all those who say I was making this and that, the time will come, and he won't allow me to forget it, to debate the St. Jude Hospital. You will be surprised when you hear what you have to hear. You'll be surprised. I was surprised myself, much as you. You'll be shocked. Because when you see the story of St. Jude will come out. Next speak. Day one, yes. I'm glad you talk about day one. Day one. Because do you know that there was a handover report that you refused to disclose? There was one sitting down here. He was there. Not you, in your seat. When we spoke about the handover report, he got up and when the handover report went in the public, he backtracked and he said, nobody never showed me that. The handover report that detailed how conditions were at St. Jude. Detailed, not by politicians, by technocrats. We made excuses for that. We took SSU, we invade people's houses. You know what happened now? They might write me for his money. We have to pay the goods and services that you all seize from the guy with the SSU. I asked the Commissioner of Police for a report on that invasion or that search. I haven't got it. I'm going to write the new Commissioner of Police to ask her for a report on the invasion, because the guy is asking me for his money. The guy is saying that he had goods and services that you all took away and he wants his money. I have to. That's not a threat. The guy is saying he wants his money. Do you know, Mr. Member for Choiseul, that on the St. Jude site, there is a complete theater in a container? And so Mr. Speaker, that's to talk for another show, because I sometimes I get very, very emotional when I speak about St. Jude, because it really hurts me. It really hurts me, Mr. Speaker, because I'm seeing nearly $300 million. $300 million. And the people still are instilled the poor condition in the stadium $300 million later. And you talk about the Prime Minister saying from Masha? That's the main topic you want to talk about? $300 million. And the people are still in a stadium. And you have a monstrosity that cannot be used. It cannot be used. And I don't think, and my colleagues here, they don't even know what's happening in that monstrosity. I haven't told them. I have not told them. They do not know the state of that monstrosity. They don't know, Because I've kept it to myself for now. So when that debate on St. Jude will come, you'll understand why we have to borrow. We have to borrow to fund because of what the economist calls the opportunity cost. Because if the money that they wasted on St. Jude and on Permandew, they had used it differently, we will not have to borrow so much today. And that is the difference. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank members for supporting this resolution. As I said, it was open and transparent. And this government will continue. And even though when we make a mistake, we will come and admit that we made a mistake. Because to err is human. If we do something and they pull us up for doing it, we'll say, yes, sir, I made a mistake. We'll give the excuse. We'll give an excuse why we did it, but the intention is always honorable. But we will not lie and lie again and unlie the first lie and lie again on the first lie. You understand? And make another lie to cover up the first lie. And say we never said anything what we see. And look for our backers to defend and practice political umbrage. You know what political umbrage is? Political umbrage is when you completely deflect the situation. That is called in the jargon political umbrage. Am I right? Am I right? Yeah. It's called political umbrage. This was just going to school. I got a long time ago, I forget. It's called political umbrage. When you know something is in one path, but you completely deflect it. So instead of talking about what the Prime Minister is the Minister of Financing, you talk about he say he come from Masha. You have a whole article about that. Just because to deflect from the point of what I have to manage, what I'm managing, and how with the help of these men and women, I must say we are doing a good job in the circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I thank members for supporting the, and I want to tell the public, Mr. Lucia, the budget for 23-24 is very soon, a few months from now. We're going to be able to give a report on the performance of the government from the last budget and the promises we made in the manifesto. We're going to be able to give a report to tick off what we've done and what we've not done, and give reasons why we haven't done it, and look for the future of this country. I must say, Mr. Speaker, in spite of the downside risks, the future is good. We had a good report of revenue for the month of November. Very good report for revenue. It probably is the highest revenue we received for the year in the month of November. I want to thank the technocrats in the Ministry of Finance, Mr. Speaker, because when we came to government, we never interfered with them. We treated them as professionals, let them do their work as professionals. We respect them as professionals. Same thing with the police force. We respect the police as professionals. We expect them to behave professionally, and we will give the guidance, but they must understand that they must follow the guidance of the political direction. That's all we ask for. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that Parliament authorizes the Minister for Finance to borrow the amount of US $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the fiscal year 2022 to 2023. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable in 20 years, commencing from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. B, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance on the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C, interest is payable at a rate of the 6 months Chicago Mercantile Exchange Term Secured Overnight Financing Rate plus 0.2% and 1.25% per annum. And D, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,277, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $3,404,261. And now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to present for second reading the bill shortly entitled Virtual Assets Bill. Mr. Speaker, the bill for consideration, the Virtual Assets Bill, seeks to provide for the regulation and supervision of a virtual asset business, of the virtual asset business in the Eastern Caribbean Currency Union, and will introduce a licensing regime to be overseen by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority in St. Lucia, the FSRA, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Mr. Speaker, seeks to strengthen the regulatory framework in the advancement of virtual asset business. Virtual asset business includes the transfer of a virtual asset, whether or not for value, and covers the instances where the virtual assets are accepted as a form of payment for product or service from a vendor. As such, a virtual asset is defined as a digital representation of value that can be traded or transferred digitally and can be used for making payments to investments. However, these do not include the digital representations of the fiat currency, such as the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, ECDB's Dcash. A difference, Mr. Speaker, between the fiat currency of the ECCU, which is called Dcash, and the virtual asset. A virtual asset is a broader and more expansive notion, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in recent years, there's been an increase and evolving of innovative measures used for the swift transfer of virtual assets. The most common example of these virtual assets being virtual currency, such as Bitcoin. We have also seen gaming tokens, such as non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and governance tokens, also considered as virtual assets, depending on the circumstances and context in which the assets exist and are used, Mr. Speaker. With the introduction of blockchain technology as a virtual asset just over a decade ago, we have seen an increase in its use as a payment product. Notwithstanding the benefits derived from the use of virtual assets, without established regulations and supervision, gives rise to their misuse due to their nature and their speed and reach. So even with virtual assets, there needs to be some form of regulation, Mr. Speaker, and that is what this bill seeks to do. The bill seeks to regulate the whole virtual asset business, and it's part of the requirements from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and it's what is called regional legislation, in that each island has passed the virtual asset bill, Mr. Speaker. St. Lucia was late in doing it, and St. Lucia is joining, because we are in a union, and we have to follow the dictates of the union. So, Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to license companies or individuals who are part of the virtual asset business, Mr. Speaker. Any such person, Mr. Speaker, who immediately before the commencement of this act was offering or operating a virtual asset business may continue to operate that virtual asset for 60 days from the date of commencement. However, within 14 days, and that is where the change comes, within 30 days, within 40 days, Mr. Speaker, of the commencement of this act, an application for a license under Section 5 of this act must be made. So you must apply for a license under Section 5 of this act if you are in the virtual asset business. Under Section 5 of the act, Mr. Speaker, you must apply for a license. And if you read Section 5, you will see that it says that application for a license, a person may make an application for a license to the authority to operate a virtual asset business. And the time frame for that, Mr. Speaker, is 30 days on the section, on the clause 12.1, the requirement for a license, or clause 13. Clause 14. Yeah, under clause 14, Mr. Speaker, you must apply 30 days for the license if you're in the business already. Under clause 14 of the Act, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill also makes reference in section 11 to a person with a registered office outside of St. Lucia, appointed and having at all times in place a person who is an ordinary resident in St. Lucia to be his principal representative, being responsible for the daily management of the place of business, among others. So, Mr. Speaker, we're trying to avoid only somebody having just a plaque and say it's an office. If you're in a virtual asset business, you must have somebody working in your office, a resident working in the office, even though you're operating from outside. The resident, you must have a resident person in the office so that they can answer all the queries, etc., Mr. Speaker. Section 12, Mr. Speaker, that a license shall place a licensee, that's a body for a virtual asset business, shall place in escrow with a registered trust company, or if an entity or person whose business is the provision of trust or custodial services, assets to discharge financial obligations to clients or licensee, and such assets must be equivalent to a minimum of 15% of the total value of client funds held by a licensee. That's an amendment, Mr. Speaker, which we are going to propose in section. So, Mr. Speaker, you must have 15% of the total value of client funds in an escrow account if you have that kind of business. That means you must have the person who is investing in your asset business must be assured that you have at least 15% in an escrow that they can use, that they can claim if anything goes wrong, Mr. Speaker. That's in section 12. Mr. Speaker, in section 13, to avoid money laundering, the person who is in that business must comply with the requirements of the Money Laundering Prevention Act, Cap 12.20 of St. Lucia, so that anybody who is in that business must comply with all the requirements of the Money Laundering Prevention Act, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in summary, this bill seeks to modernize the financial environment in which we operate. We're operating in an environment of virtual assets. We're operating in an environment of Bitcoin, an environment in a blockchain environment where we have fast-moving assets, people doing business, e-commerce, doing business on the internet. So there must be some level of control, and there must be some level of scrutiny. And in St. Lucia, the FSRA is the body charged to do that scrutiny, perform that scrutiny, but under the supervision of the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank. Mr. Speaker, this is to modernize the financial space in which we exist, to modernize the environment in which we exist, to create new means of new opportunities for business people. And I know there are many young people who are interested in the virtual asset business. So this bill, what it seeks to do is it seeks to create an enabling environment for that business to operate, but the necessary control and necessary regulations so it can operate within the ambit of the law, and it can protect people who invest in that business speaker. Yes, Mr. Speaker, under section 4, free, Mr. Speaker, if a person continues to operate a virtual asset business, the person shall within 7 days of the commencement of this act make an application for a license under section 5. So, Mr. Speaker, if you're already in the business, when this act is passed in this parliament, within 7 days you must begin the application process so you can get your business registered as a virtual asset business. Mr. Speaker, as I said, this is again modernizing the financial space, creating more opportunity, but doing it in a regulated fashion and doing it in a fashion that is accountable so we can protect the assets of the people who invest in that kind of business, Mr. Speaker. I ask honorable members for the support. Thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the virtual asset business bill be read a second time. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, having said so, I move that I want to thank members. I think it's a very simple bill. Everyone understands the need for modernization. Everyone understands the environment that we live in. There's need for regulation. There's need for people to be allowed new avenues, but there's also need for regulation, and so that we can protect investors and protect our country's good name, Mr. Speaker. So I ask that the bill be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the virtual assets bill be read a second time. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
An act to provide for the regulation and supervision of a virtual asset business in or from St. Lucia and for regulated matters.
Clause 2.
Interpretation.
Clause 2 stands part of the bill. Clause 3.
Application.
PM, your light is on accidentally, or are you saying something?
No.
Clause 3 stands part of the bill. Clause 4.
Requirement for license.
Clause 4 stands part of the bill. Clause 5.
Application for license.
Clause 5 stands part of the bill. Clause 6.
Grant and refusal of application for license.
Clause 6 stands part of the bill. Clause 7.
Conditions for license.
Clause 7 stands part of the bill. Clause 8.
License and renewal.
Clause 8 stands part of the bill. Clause 9.
Suspension and revocation of license.
Clause 9 stands part of the bill. Clause 10.
Registers.
Clause 10 stands part of the bill. Clause 11.
Appointment and obligations of principal representative.
Clause 11 stands part of the bill. Clause 12.
Requirements of a licensee.
Clause 12 stands part of the bill. Clause 13.
Audit and financial statements.
Clause 13 stands part of the bill. Clause 14.
Prospectus for issue or sale of a virtual asset.
Clause 14 stands part of the bill. Clause 15.
Powers of the authority regarding a prospectus.
Clause 15 stands part of the bill. Clause 16.
Amendment to a prospectus.
Clause 16 stands part of the bill. Clause 17.
General powers of the authority.
Clause 17 stands part of the bill. Clause 18.
Fees.
Clause 18 stands part of the bill. Clause 19.
General penalty.
Clause 19 stands part of the bill. Clause 20.
Civil penalty.
Clause 20 stands part of the bill. Clause 21.
Exclusion of liability.
Clause 21 stands part of the bill. Clause 22.
Guidelines.
Clause 22 stands part of the bill. Clause 23.
Regulations.
Clause 23 stands part of the bill. Clause 1.
Short title.
Clause 1 stands part of the bill. Members, the question is that the committee rises and the bill be reported. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I beg to report that the Virtual Assets Business Bill went through committee stage without amendments. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the committee be adopted and the bill be read a third time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that the report of the committee be adopted and that the Virtual Asset Business Bill be read a third time and passed. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
Be it enacted by the King's Most Excellent Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the House of Assembly and Senate of St. Lucia, and by the authority of the same as follows. This act may be cited as the Virtual Asset Business Bill 2022.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stands adjourned, sine die.
Prior to putting the question, let me, first of all, he's not present, but I want to commend the member for Castries Central for keeping his word and keeping the instruction of the House to make the document, the lease agreement, a document of the House, which he did this morning, and every member was given a copy of it. I also want to thank the members, at least those who were sufficiently generous to have placed a donation in the box downstairs to assist the less fortunate. Honourable members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned sine die. I now put the question. As many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.
eh bien, nous avons venu au bout de session qui consiste jeudi, sur le 6 décembre, avec c'était un chai parole à ce une motion côté gouvernement prêté 110 928 dollars américains pour faire un chai de fonds un projet pour comprendre le ministère du projet pour assister budget là projet pour faire payer dette qui le gouvernement déjà mis avant pour plusieurs différents sujets avec particulièrement comprendre le ministère finissement parolé il dit que il y en a ces bagages là qui servi l'agence là c'est pour assister pour faire combat contre ça fait crime là une différents monde enfin presque toutes ces gens qui parlent aujourd'hui c'est même parlement qui parle à ce sujet un ministre de l'agriculture toutes les autres parler avec aussi nous quand faut savoir que la même parlement pour ça c'est Denry Nord ça c'est ministre pour l'éducation il pas présent puisqu'il notre pays aussi chef face à l'opposition il pas parler aussi il pas présent en cas concept avec la dernière discussion qui était très intéressant à part de l'agence là yo prêté aujourd'hui pour faire différents sujets comme on dit yo aussi passé un bill qui partait une pièce de décision premier ministre ça c'est à ce ça virtual asset business et nommé premier ministre présenté avec la part d'une pièce qui a été discussion à ce ça moi j'ai invité Winston Springer qui ici et puis moi et qui Barou enfin qui dit nous exactement ça qui passait en anglais.
Thank you very much, Michael. Well, to sum up, when we came back at 2:30 or thereabout, debate continued on the motion before the House for the borrowing of $102,128,294 from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to provide budgetary support for the financial year 2022-23. That was read a second time. And going through all its stages of this afternoon was the Virtual Assets Bill. That was read a third time and passed. On Thursday, there is a sitting of the upper house when the motion for the borrowing of the said amount, 102 million US dollars, will be before the upper house, and the virtual assets or the virtual asset business bill will also be before the upper house. Until such time, I am Winston Springer. Do have a very good Tuesday evening. Bye-bye now.